crashing out of here. Are you with me, my dear?
You can count on me. Destin and I are crashing out of here. Are you with us? Oh, you can count on me.
It's been 62 years since Gilligan's Island ran aground on CBS, and somehow never left. 3 seasons, 98 episodes. Canceled in 1967 without a finale, never rescued, never escaped. By every measure, it shouldn't have survived the decade. Instead, it became a syndication empire, hundreds of millions of dollars, household names worldwide. What the 7 people who built that received in return is a story nobody warned them about. Let's see where they are in 2026. Bob Denver as Gilligan. Bob Denver was born Robert Osborne Denver on January 9, 1935 in New Rochelle, New York. He was 29 when Gilligan's Island premiered on September 26, 1964. Already famous from Dobie Gillis, already typecast, already aware that a second defining role could go either way. He wasn't even the first choice. The role was offered to Jerry Van Deen, who turned it down to star in My Mother the Car, a decision Van spent the rest of his career calling the worst he ever made. What Denver built wasn't stupidity. It was innocence, a genuinely different thing. Gilligan couldn't imagine the world could be hostile. Every escape he accidentally foiled, he foiled while trying to help. In a show full of exaggerated archetypes, Denver found the one note nobody else was playing, a person who means well in a world that punishes it. He was the lowest billed cast member. His name appeared last in the opening credits, despite the show being named after his character. He never publicly complained, not once. But here's what Bob Denver actually did with that position. After season 1, Denver pushed to have the Professor and Mary Ann added by name to the opening theme. 2 castmates credited only as the rest. He won. He then spent years lobbying CBS for a reunion film, advocating for the entire ensemble, until Rescue from Gilligan's Island finally happened in 1978. He answered fan mail by hand for decades. He did not build a wall. He built a community. 4 marriages, 4 children. Marijuana arrests in 1971 and 1998. He spent his final years in Princeton, West Virginia, running a small radio station with his 4th wife, Dreama Perry. He died on September 2, 2005 at 70. Tina Louise confirmed in 2025 that the cast made approximately $1,500 per episode and received no residuals. That is what 60 years of syndication bought the man whose name was in the title. The actor who spent a career playing television's most harmless screw-up turned out to be the cast member who fought hardest for everyone else's credit. Dawn Wells as Mary Ann. Dawn Alberta Wells was born on October 18, 1938 in Reno, Nevada. Miss Nevada 1959, a beauty queen who could act. She was 25 when Gilligan's Island premiered, the youngest woman in the cast, and one of the 2 actors pushed into the rest in the original opening theme before Denver intervened. Mary Ann Summers, the farm girl from Winfield, Kansas, practical, warm, and without pretension, was the character the audience chose when forced to pick. In the show's long-running debate, Ginger or Mary Ann, the vote was never close. Wells later argued the character was smart, fair, and emotionally grounding, which is why she lasted as the audience's favorite long after the show ended. But here's where the story separates from the character. Wells gave herself to the show's legacy in ways her castmates largely didn't. Hundreds of fan conventions, learning regulars' names, running an acting school in Idaho, founding the Wishing Wells Foundation. She was the cast member most attached to the fans, the one who showed up every time. Her private life was quieter than the public persona. She married Larry Rosen, divorced in 1967, and had no children. In later years, she faced serious financial stress. A fundraiser was organized for her in 2018. In 2020, court documents revealed she was living with dementia. She died in Los Angeles on December 30th, 2020 from complications of COVID-19. She was 82. $1,500 per episode in 1964. Nothing from 60 years of reruns. For Wells, no real estate portfolio, no franchise built on refusal, that arithmetic had a specific consequence. The woman who looked like the safest person on the island spent her final years being kept financially stable by the fans she had spent her life showing up for. Tina Louise as Ginger Grant. Tina Louise was born on February 11, 1934 in New York City. She was 30 when Gilligan's Island premiered, a Broadway-trained actress who had left the musical Fade Out, Fade In to play Ginger Grant, believing this was a stepping stone to the dramatic film career she had already begun building. What she brought was real craft, the practiced glamour, the way Ginger could shift from ditzy to devastating in a single scene. That was character work inside a format not designed to notice it. The audience responded to the poster. That distinction defined the next 6 decades of her life. But here's where things fracture in a way that never fully healed. When the reunion film industry started in 1978, Louise said no. No to Rescue from Gilligan's Island. No to the Castaways in 1979. No to the Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island in 1981. She was replaced in all 3 by Judith Baldwin and then Constance Forsland. Audiences watched Ginger Grant without Tina Louise for over a decade. In 2025, she told Forbes the cast earned approximately $1,500 per episode and received no residuals from reruns or streaming. She is the one who put that number on the public record. It was not an accident that the cast member most aggrieved by the economics was also the one who finally said it out loud. She has one daughter. She runs an early childhood literacy program in New York she has funded for decades, that most people who know her name have never heard of. Tina Louise is 92 years old in 2026, the last surviving main cast member. The castaway most afraid of being trapped by the island became the one who outlived them all. Natalie Schaefer as Mrs. Howell. Natalie Schaefer was born on November 5, 1900 in Red Bank, New Jersey, though she would have disputed every word of that sentence. She spent her entire career insisting she was born in 1912. Her publicity said 1912. Her interview said 1912. Researchers going back to her birth certificate confirmed it. The woman playing Eunice Lovey Wentworth Howell, the richest woman on the island, defined by inherited wealth and social pretension, had been lying about her age since before most of her co-stars were born. She was 63 when the show premiered. Not 51, 63. She took the pilot for one reason. It was shooting in Hawaii, and she expected it to flop. She was a respected stage actress who viewed the project with the benign condescension of someone who expects to be home by Thursday. But here is the twist that reframes everything. The woman playing the fictional millionaire had, through decades of quiet real estate investment in Los Angeles, accumulated real wealth most people in the production never knew about. She had also quietly survived breast cancer, telling almost no one. She reportedly negotiated a contract clause against close-ups. The show eventually stopped honoring it. She stayed anyway in return for the reunion films. She had been married to actor Louis Calhern and had no children. She died in Beverly Hills on April 10, 1991 at 90 of liver cancer, her obituary still listing 1912. She left between $1.5 and $2 million to the actors' home. She thought she was booking a vacation. She left her money to working actors who needed it. That is not the woman the character was written to be. Alan Hale Jr. is the skipper. Alan Hale McAhan was born on March 8, 1921 in Los Angeles, son of Alan Hale Sr., who played Little John to Errol Flynn's Robin Hood. The son inherited the father's size and warmth, both. He was 43 when Gilligan's Island premiered, and Sherwood Schwartz later said that once Hale became available, casting the skipper was essentially finished. He played Jonas Grumby not as a buffoon, but as a man whose authority was genuine, and whose affection for Gilligan ran deeper than his frustration. Schwartz modeled the physical comedy between Hale and Denver deliberately on Laurel and Hardy rhythms. Hale and Denver made it feel invented. And here is what made him genuinely extraordinary. He never ran from the role. Not once. While other cast members navigated the complicated relationship between the show that made them famous and the careers they'd imagined, Hale leaned in completely. He opened Captain Hale's Lobster Barrel in Hollywood and appeared there in costume. He showed up at supermarket openings as the skipper. He understood something his castmates were still working out, that being beloved is not a lesser form of success. For most performers, it is the unachievable ceiling. People who knew him offset described the same quality, as warm in a parking lot at 11 at night as he was on camera at 9 in the morning. Whatever Jonas Grumby was, loyal, steady, genuinely glad to see you, Hale had been that before the cameras and remained it after. Alan Hale Jr. died on January 2nd, 1990 from thymus cancer. He was 68. He was the skipper. Not that he played him, that he was him. Jim Backus as Thurston Howell III. James Gilmore Backus was born on February 25, 1913 in Cleveland, Ohio. He was 51 when Gilligan's Island premiered, already carrying 4 decades of radio, stage, film, and television, an appearance in Rebel Without a Cause, and Mr. Magoo's voice, the cartoon millionaire who walked off cliffs with aristocratic obliviousness. The role of Thurston Howell III was written specifically for him. The catch? He was considered too expensive. CBS increased the budget. They were right to. What made Howell work was what Backus refused to do with him. He could have played him cruel or stupid. Instead, he played him as a man so insulated by wealth, he'd arrived at innocent generosity, genuinely fond of Gilligan, ridiculous and tender in equal measure. He was, in ways the show rarely acknowledged, the moral center of the island. Playing a buffoon with genuine warmth, without the actor's smirk that tells the audience he knows the character is ridiculous, requires specific commitment. Backus gave Howell that consistency across 3 seasons and the reunion films. He was married to Henny Backus and had 1 daughter. In the 1980s, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and continued working for years with characteristic grace. He died on July 3, 1989 at 76, leaving more than 600 screen appearances behind him. The castaway who played wealth better than anyone on the island may have been the one the network had to stretch hardest to afford. Russell Johnson as the professor. Russell David Johnson was born on November 10, 1924 in Ashley, Pennsylvania, and he came to that soundstage carrying something almost none of his co-stars carried. He had been to war. Johnson enlisted in the Army Air Forces and flew 34 combat missions over the Pacific as a bombardier navigator on B-25 aircraft. On a mission over the Philippines in 1945, his plane was hit and crash-landed. He survived. He was awarded the Air Medal and the Purple Heart. He was 20 years old. He came home and studied acting on the GI Bill. He was 39 when Gilligan's Island premiered. The Professor, a science teacher and scoutmaster, the island's problem solver, was the show's logic and its hope. The joke was that he couldn't patch the boat. Johnson understood the joke. He found it funny. And then, across decades, a bit less, not because he resented the show, but because the professor represented something that quietly bothered him. The idea that intelligence alone is enough. He'd been in situations where capability either saved you or it didn't. He published a memoir, Here on Gilligan's Isle, in 1993, more candid about the combat years than the television ones. He said the war gave him a standard for what mattered. Against that standard, questions about the opening theme credits registered as much as they deserved, which was not very. He died at home on January 16, 2014, at 89 of natural causes. No syndication residuals, not $1 from 60 years of reruns of a show about a man who could build anything. The man viewers joked could fix anything ended up being one of the show's most durable symbols of actual decency. Kurt Russell as Jungle Boy. Kurt Vogel Russell was born on March 17, 1951 in Springfield, Massachusetts. Son of actor Bing Russell, already a working child actor when he appeared on Gilligan's Island in a season 1 episode in February 1965. He was 13. He played the Jungle Boy, a feral child living on the island who speaks no English and keeps disrupting the castaways' escape attempts. Nobody watching had any idea what they were looking at. The career that followed included Escape from New York, The Thing, Tombstone, and the kind of filmography that absorbs an entire generation of fans. He has been with Goldie Hawn since 1983, one of Hollywood's most durable partnerships in an industry built on dissolution. He turned 75 in March 2026. When people watch that episode now, the reaction is always the same. Wait, is that Kurt Russell? 13 years old, in a loincloth on a raft, on his way somewhere considerably larger. Don Rickles as Norbert Wiley. Donald J. Rickles was born on May 8, 1926 in Queens, New York. He was approximately 39 when his Gilligan's Island episode aired in 1965, playing a conniving castaway named Norbit Wiley, a man who attempts to use the castaway's situation for his own advantage, which made him a reasonable villain for the show's format and an entirely natural fit for Rickles. By then, he was already building the insult comedy reputation that would make him an institution. The caustic wit, the affectionate demolition, the note he had found early and never stopped playing. What followed was a career measured in decades. Las Vegas residencies, The Tonight Show, films, an Emmy, and a friendship with Frank Sinatra so publicly displayed that Rat Pack adjacent became part of his permanent identity. He was married to Barbara Rickles for decades and had 2 children. Don Rickles died on April 6, 2017 at 90. On the island, he was a guest villain for 45 minutes. Off it, one of American comedy's permanent landmarks. Zsa Gabor as Erica. Tiffany Smith Sari Gabor, known as Zsa Zsa Gabor, was born on February 6, 1917 in Budapest, Hungary. She was approximately 48 when her Gilligan's Island episode aired in 1965, playing Erica Tiffany Smith, a fabulously wealthy socialite who discovers the island and briefly turns it into her private resort. The role required someone who could play over-the-top glamour without irony and make it compelling rather than tedious. There was exactly one person available for this. Gabor had spent decades turning her own persona into one of American celebrity culture's most recognizable performances. The accent, the jewels, the 9 marriages, to men ranging from socialites to royalty, were not supplementary to her career, they were the career. She understood earlier than most that the performance of a life could be as bankable as any role. She died on December 18, 2016 in Los Angeles at 99. She guest starred as a fantasy figure. In real life, Zsa Zsa was always the bigger performance. She knew it. That's what made her unforgettable. Richard Kiel as a Russian agent. Richard Dawson Kiel was born on September 13, 1939 in Detroit, Michigan. He was approximately 26 when he appeared on Gilligan's Island in a 1965-66 episode as a Russian spy, making use of the considerable physical presence he carried at 7 feet 2 inches. At the time, he was still early in a career that had not yet found its defining role. That came in 1977. As Jaws, the steel-toothed assassin in The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, Kiel became one of the most visually iconic figures in Bond franchise history. Audience response to The Spy Who Loved Me was so strong that producers wrote Jaws into Moonraker specifically, and Kiel gave the character an arc of humanity that made him something more than a physical gimmick. He died on September 10, 2014 at 74. The man cast as a forgettable Soviet agent on a desert island became one of cinema's most recognizable faces. The island didn't know what it had. Phil Silvers as Harold Hecuba. Philip Silvers was born on May 11, 1911 in Brooklyn, New York, a child performer in vaudeville before most of his Gilligan's Island co-stars were born. He was approximately 54 when he appeared in 1965 as Harold Hecuba, a pompous movie producer who washes ashore and briefly commandeers the castaways' lives. By then, Silvers was already a television institution. The Phil Silvers Show, Sergeant Bilko, had aired from 1955 to 1959 and was, at its height, one of the most watched programs in America. 4 Emmy Awards. His appearance on Gilligan's Island was prestige stunt casting, the show signaling its comedy aspirations by bringing in a certified heavyweight. He died on November 1, 1985 at 74. He only visited the island, but when Phil Silvers walks through a door, the room reorganizes itself around him. The island, for once, was the smaller thing. Gilligan's Island ran for 3 seasons, 98 episodes, and 0 finales. The castaways were never rescued. Schwartz begged CBS for a closing episode. The network said no. 7 people walked off a soundstage in Burbank in 1967, carrying a show that didn't carry them back. $1,500 per episode, no residuals, 60 years of reruns, and the flat fee they negotiated in 1964. One fought for his castmates' credits and answered the fan mail by hand. One gave herself to the fans until the money ran out. One built a wall and outlived everyone. One treated the whole thing as a vacation and turned out wealthier than the millionaires she played. One embraced the role so completely that the role became the man. One brought it dignity and warmth. One had survived a war and held both facts, the combat record and the coconut radio, in the same life without apology. The guests brought recognition. The 7 gave it a world. The island was fictional. The contracts were real. And somewhere, on a soundstage that no longer exists, there is still a boat nobody ever fixed, despite having, right there on the beach, a man who could build anything. The writers thought that was the joke. It was the whole story.